I hope you guys are well. Welcome to ViewModels and LiveData. On a previous video on data binding, we made a very simple app, a time application. Uh, if you've not seen that video, please just go back. The link is above this video. Just follow it and then you can come back and follow along. So on the previous video on data binding, we made a very simple app, a time application, and it was working all fine. Well, it was working fine until you decide to rotate the device, then data just gets lost and the timer stops. So these are bugs and we want to solve them in this video, and the only way you can do that is using ViewModel and LiveData. So once your device is rotated, then a configuration change is introduced. So for this case, a rotation, then your whole activity is restarted, and that's why your data goes missing. So this is the activity life cycle that your application normally goes through. So what is a view model? So a view model is just an object that provides data for your user interface components and survives configuration changes. So this sounds like an optimal solution for application. So we should also try at least to have a view model for every UI controller. And by UI controller, I mean fragments and activities. So once we have a view model and a UI controller separate, then we'll be introducing a whole new architecture to our application. And this is good because separation of concern helps us divide our code into classes, each with specific and separate, well-defined responsibilities. So for this case, we have three classes: the UI controller, the view model, and our live data. So each of these classes has its own role to play in helping us persist our data during configuration changes. So our UI controller just displays the data and it also captures user data. Our view model, on the other hand, holds all the data needed for the user interface and all the logic and calculation. And a point to note is that you should never reference fragments, activities, or views inside your view model. So I repeat again, do not keep references of UI components or views in your view models. So this is because when the Android system decides to shut down your application and your view model is holding a reference to your activities, what do you think will happen to that? We'll be introducing some serious bugs into application, and we don't want to do that. So let's get into coding. Yeah, so here I am in Android Studio and I'm opening the project in the previous video that was data binding. So everything is just the same. I've not changed anything. So I hope your code is also ready and everything looks the same. Okay, so to get started with data binding, view models, and live data, you have to make sure that all these are actually declared in your build.gradle. So my lifecycle components are here. The dependencies are declared in my build.gradle file, and also data binding is enabled right there. So that's the very first step into working with view models and live data. So let's just go ahead and create a new class, and we call this the view model, the activities view model, that is main activity view model. So it's always a good practice to name the view model after the particular UI controller. So for this case, main activity view model, and we are going to extend from the view model class. Okay, that's good. So we can proceed back to the layout file. Now currently we are using variables from the activity, but you're going to remove this. We are going to use the view model instead. So I'm just going to name this view model, and the type I'm going to pass the path pointing to the view model itself. Okay, so which means we are supposed to be changing all this from visibility here, text, and also these buttons. So to get started, let's just go to main activity. Let's just copy all these variables from here except the binding file. We are copying so that you can just leave references, and we paste them inside here. So the next thing is to take the methods and take them to the view model. So at first, let's start with the start timer. Let's just paste it inside here. Don't mind about the errors, we're going to fix this. And the start or stop and cancel timer. Let me just copy all this and move them to the view model. So you should be keen not to move methods that have references to UI controls. So these methods, okay, I'm going to get rid of this because we're going to use ViewModels to help us with activity lifecycle callbacks. We just get rid of that, and most of these methods left control the UI views, so we are just going to leave them here. So I want to move this. Minute. Stop timer. Okay. Okay, so let's go to our main activity, the XML file. So we are supposed to be removing all these variables from here. Any reference to activity, we are supposed to be swapping all this reference to activity with the view model. So how is it that we're going to do this? All right. So we have our is running variable here. We can, since it's already a live data object, we can just go to main activity. I'm going to place it here. So we are going to listen to any changes occurring to is running. Sorry. First of all, let's just initialize the view model. This is a view model. The main activity view model. It is. Okay, let me initialize it down here. You call the view model providers. So you can add these dependencies if you don't have this file, and let gradual sync. Okay, and when it's done, you can pass this. Then we get the view model class. That's the main activity view model class. So this is initializing the view model. So already we have access to our view model using the view model variable. Okay, so we can now listen to whether the timer is still running or not. Let me just call is running here, the view model. And then we call observe. Sorry, let me just undo this. Call is running and we observe. Let's pass this and the observer. So we can check if it's running. It's running. Then we perform some actions here. Okay, in our activity a layout file, let's just create a whole new variable here that keeps track whether the timer is running. Let's call it is running. Is timer running? And of course this is of type boolean. Okay, fine. So let's just remove this variable. So at this place, instead of asking the activity, we're just going to reference from the variable that we've just created. Okay, that's fine. So we should also add another variable here for progress. So even the progress variable should have a reference of a variable from the ViewModel itself. Okay, so let's just head back to the main activity, and since we've already created this variable here, we can come here and say and call binding, and we look for is timer running, and we set it to is running. And also, let me just get rid of this first. We also have our view model that's uninitialized in the layout file. Okay, so that should work just fine. So next is to check the progress. So you have to do it from our view model class. So what we're going to do is to just initialize a variable here that checks the progress. It's a variable. Let's make it a mutable live data. So in our activity XML file, we can just call our view model. Yeah, progress, just like that. Oh, let me just change this to int instead, to integer. Okay. So once that is that, we can come and change things here. Let me just initialize another variable that will be responsible for the timer string. It's also a mutable live data object of type string. Let me just make it to 0. Okay. All right, fine. So which means we won't need this. Let me just get rid of this, and we can use the variable from our ViewModel class. Perfect. Okay, so what is left is to set data to these variables because currently they're empty. So we can do that here. So our timer string, we call value, and we set it to this time left. And for the progress variable, we also call value, and we set it to seconds or to int. So this will take care of all this. Let me just get rid of this. Okay, so the next step is to, when our timer is finished, we need a callback from our view model to the activity, telling the activity that, okay, this timer has stopped, so do something. Okay, so let's just create some, let's just call them events just below here, like timer stopped event. It's a timer stopped event. It's a mutable live data object too. This is Boolean. So once we detect any changes, then the activity will do all other UI controls. Okay, fine. So when all this is complete, then we have to set this back to false. Let me just make this false. Then we can call timer. This value goes to false. So let's just go and make it true right here on finish. No. Let me just change the name of this. It's supposed to be reset timer instead of stopped. Timer reset event. Okay, fine. So we can come and set it to true here. Timer reset event. And we set this value to true. Just like that. Then we can get rid of all this. And we can do the same for resume timer. Let's just copy this. Paste them here. resumed. On timer resumed event. Okay, so using these variables, you can go back to the activity and listen for any changes are happening here. So timer resumed event. Okay, that's well done. So there's one for timer stopped here. Let's just create another one, another callback. Just going to copy all this. Stopped. All right, that's okay. So we can remove this and just say timer stopped. Okay, let me just do one last check to see if these things are correct. Okay, so let's go back to the main activity. We are going to clear this method right here. We have just finished. Okay, also this method. But first, let's go to the main activity. The XML file. There are these buttons here that call reset timers and whatsoever. We are going to change this.